Gospel according to John, the 10th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. But I am the Good Shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. The Gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Well, as Pastor Dave said earlier this morning, this text from the Gospel of John is our text. We are Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, and we are constantly throwing our name out into the community and inviting others to join us to be a part of Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. But how often do we think about the Good Shepherd? How much do we know about sheep herding? Here in Gaithersburg, not many of us have much experience working with sheep. Perhaps we were present a few Wednesdays ago when we had pony rides on our front lawn. But I'd be willing to bet that that's the most contact that we've had with livestock in many months, if not years or ever. Well, I did a little bit of research on sheep in preparation for this weekend. Sheep are known to be blundering, foolish animals. They have a reputation for being, well, dumb. One of our professors at the seminary likes to tell the story of his friend who was a sheep farmer, and she was washing dishes at her sink one morning, and she looked out into her lawn to see that there was a sheep upside down, all four legs straight up in the air, and she thought to herself that this sheep had clearly died, and so she dried off and went out to the yard to take care of the animal. And when she got closer to the sheep, she saw that it was still breathing. And as she walked up to it, she realized that this poor animal had fallen into a ditch in their backyard and thought itself to be dead. So she, the sheep farmer, had to right the sheep and then convince it to walk and that it was okay to move, that it had not indeed died in its fall. Sheep do not behave like most livestock. We're familiar with cattle and horses that we see in the cowboy films of old, and we like to see how the cowboys hoot and holler and chase the cows and chase the horses. But if you stand behind a flock of sheep and make a loud noise, pandemonium breaks out. They don't run where you want them to. They run directly at you, trying to figure out where the noise is coming from. And so instead of prodding sheep to get them to move, sheep require a shepherd, someone to walk out in front of the sheep to guide them. Sheep will not go someplace that they have not seen somebody already step. This is the kind of story that one particular pastor was describing to his congregation as they were taking a tour of the Holy Land, and they were walking through these fields, and the pastor said to his parishioners, "We're going to see a lot of shepherds in this area. You're going to see these shepherds who walk out boldly in front of their sheep, and as they walk, the sheep follow very closely behind." And as they turned the corner on this one particular hill, the pastor witnessed with the same thing the congregation saw. There was a man chasing a herd of sheep who were frightened and fleeing for their lives. And so the pastor says to his parishioners, well, that's not what I expected at all. And he walks over to the fence and he shouts to the man who's chasing the sheep, and he says, I just told these people that you're supposed to be leading sheep, that a good shepherd leads his sheep. And the man shouts back to him, you're right, a good shepherd does exactly that. But I'm the butcher. How often do we confuse the shepherd for the butcher? How often do we talk about the fears and the perils and the trouble in our lives without identifying that there is someone leading us? I'm afraid that in this day and age, we've become all too familiar with the butcher. When tragedy or terror strike, do we look for the one who leads us out ahead, or do we fearfully look behind us, running away and searching for the one who must be chasing us? There's one more other important detail that I learned about sheep as I did some research on this sermon. And that is the story that one sheep farmer from the Midwest was known to tell. That it never ceased to amaze him as he was growing up, that he could walk right through a sleeping flock of sheep, and they wouldn't even lift their heads. But one stranger enters the gates while those sheep are sleeping, and chaos would break out. They would wake up and run around for fear that they could not find the one who was supposed to lead them. In our passage this morning, Jesus says, I know my own, and my own know me. How true is that? That when we are at peace, there's nothing that can disturb us. This reading from John this morning may also seem familiar to us because of our familiarity with Psalm 23. Jesus and his listeners would also have been very familiar with this passage, and I'm sure that you know it, and you can say it with me if you know it. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. This is the psalm that is most associated with funerals and with funeral liturgy, and popular television. Whenever there's a funeral on TV, will use this psalm to cue you in, to let you know that something has happened and that we are at a funeral. Last year when I was a chaplain at a nursing home on my internship, this was one of the most requested psalms. As I sat next to someone in the final hours of their life, a life well lived, my patients, my residents would want to hear that the Lord is their shepherd, that even in death's dark valley, there was no need to fear evil, because the Lord was with them. I think of the gospel message this morning from John as our own challenge from Jesus. And it doesn't read that way when we first read it, but as we look to it, we see that Jesus challenges us to see that in living our lives, there is no need to fear evil. That in the midst of chaos, in the midst of a broken world, in the midst of our own anger and our own foolishness, we must overcome our own sheep-like nature and stop panicking to look for the Good Shepherd. I believe that Jesus used the Good Shepherd imagery to tell of his love and his promise for his people, because he knew that talking about sheep farming would make sense on the hills of the ancient Near East. But I also think that Jesus used this imagery because he knew that people would understand that a shepherd loves his animals with all of their idiosyncrasies, still leading them and saving them from both real terror, like wolves, and dangerous cliffs, as well as their own foolishness, believing that they had died when they fell into a ditch. Like sheep, we have the tendency to run from our butchers instead of first seeking out the shepherd who promises to lead us to safety. Like sheep, we take for granted our relationship with the shepherd, only to panic when we realize that he might not be there. And like sheep, we have the great tendency to act like fools. Unlike sheep, however, we are sealed, marked with the cross of Christ in the waters of our baptism. Our shepherd is with us even in death's valleys. We gather here at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church as believers because we are able to better hear the shepherd's voice through the chaos of our lives. We gather here because it is here at this altar that we meet Christ in the body and the blood, to be fed and renewed to face the world again. And that is why we invite others to join us here, not because we know any better than anyone else about how to get through this life, but because we can always use the reminder that we are not alone, that in the waters of our baptism, Jesus claims us as his sheep, and he is present with us, walking into the dangers ahead of us. We have a good and caring shepherd who loves each one of us fools. For that we say, Amen.